Welcome everyone to the Tourist of Molecules podcast. I'm really excited today to be sitting down with Dustin Elliott from NNB. From what I understand, Dustin, and I always get the guests to sort of clarify, a little bit about you after this. But What I know of you so far, it's always good for you to get a snapshot as well. Number one, you work for NNB, but number two, you're basically you're in charge of like the brand level of things. So what I've noticed is you actually are doing something, and it seems to be you heading it up, that is really smart. You actually reach out to brands, to people that are making content, to people that are reviewing ingredients. And you make those connections, but not only do you do that, which no ingredient brand ever does, by the way, like a huge gap in the market. I'm sure you don't need to tell that. But you also support brands that use your ingredients. Like this is something that I just think is, and it just makes so much sense that someone's doing that, because obviously it helps promote the brand, helps promote the ingredient, and also helps introduce people to that whole ecosystem as well. Which is how I found you. I found you from Price Plow. I saw your ingredients in products. They look super cool. I was actually dying to see that in some products over here in Australia, which wasn't really the case. I think maybe Switch had picked up, Genius Pure, the Alpha-GPC, and then obviously you reached out to me and we started to build that connection, which we could talk a bit about later. But how would you describe your role and what you kind of do, and maybe just a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so it was interesting when my background is actually in brand management on the customer-facing side. So that's the reason why you're seeing a little bit of a differentiation between how I handle things and traditionally how business-to-business companies handle things. So the thing is that when this company first hired me, they were thinking, okay, chief marketing officer, it would be sales materials like sales sheets at shows, setting up shows and conferences, and doing sort of like your basic advertising, but advertising to brands. I insisted to have the role or make the title chief brand officer because I told them, look, I'm not a marketing person. I'm not a put up a social media post and report the click-through rate and stuff like that and go through like the ROI. Brand strategy, there isn't necessarily like a defined ROI, like when you just put up a post and then you get the click-through. Really, it's controlling the narrative, it's storytelling, and then it's pulling your target consumers from start to finish through a journey to your ingredients. So for me, it's this: when you're dealing with more innovative ingredients, it's not enough to just say, hey brand, look at how cool my ingredient is, because then the brand is always going to say, okay, this ingredient doesn't fit in my current product life cycle of the concepts I'm coming up with. And then in addition to that, customers aren't asking for it. You can have the coolest ingredient in the world with the most research, but if customers aren't asking for it, brands aren't going to be requesting it. So what I'm doing from a strategy standpoint is on multiple fronts. I'm making the industry aware of our research. I'm translating what that research will mean to the consumer. I'm also translating what kind of claims the brand can have that speaks to the consumer, but then I'm raising the level of awareness for the consumer. So I'm hitting brands and manufacturers on all fronts. You can call it a pincer movement. I'm coming from business to business side. I'm coming from the customer awareness side. We even have websites that don't say NNB like on the face of it. One is the Berberine Truth, where it talks about weight management, blood sugar, blood glucose control, berberine, things like that. But it all ties back to dihydroberberine. And then we have another one that's called Next New Vitamin, which is, about how ergothioneine is considered the longevity vitamin. But it's just a website about longevity, all the different ways you can improve your longevity, but it all ties back to ergothioneine. And what these websites do is, it's one thing, to optimize on SEO, which is great, but SEO has been, falling due to the dawn of AI, SEO search results. And so having these experts talk about these ingredients will increase the likelihood that these ingredients get recommended when you search them through AI as well. So it's a really multifaceted approach, and it goes so far that I'm even involved in the research. So the preclinical research direction, the actual human clinical research direction, in terms of setting up the research study, what the outcome should be, because it's all going to translate to claims. All too often in this industry, you'll have really, really brilliant people do the 500th study on an herbal blend for endurance. And just to find out that nobody cares about boosting their endurance. They want to look better. They want to get stronger. And if endurance is a byproduct of other things like longevity or more muscles or, being leaner, then so be it. But endurance in and of itself, you're talking about cyclists and runners, and those guys are just taking carb products during the run and electrolytes. So, I'm bridging that gap between the science, the B2B, and the customer.
Dude, it's brilliant. And I think it's something that, as I kind of touched on, NNB is doing that I've not seen anyone get close to doing in the space. There's a few other good ingredient companies, and obviously that's a broad term because they might be making the ingredients, they might just be distributing the ingredients, they might be, the face of the ingredient in some sense. But NNB does a bit of everything there too, which we can get into in a little bit as well. But I strongly agree. And as a retailer, and I suppose I do a little bit of consulting as well, essentially, and work on some little brand projects here and there. I have had one and looking at doing another. I get that insight too sometimes, that it's like what a lot of brands disconnect with, or even sometimes retailers to a degree, is what actually people are asking for, on the ground. And so often, we'll have people come into the store. It's a really good microcosm for me, actually. It's probably the best market research I'll ever have. That's why we always want to keep that little store, because I get that sort of slice, obviously in my demographic, in my country, and there's a few layers to that I don't get the full picture of all of the nation, but I get a nice slice of what the nation's doing around supplements and what they're asking for and what's penetrated into their psyche. And it's fascinating how often I'll see something take off or really get pushed by brands or manufacturers that no one really, they might talk about it because there's that groundswell, right, of TikTok and Instagram, and they've sort of maybe got some influencers talking about it. They've done their own marketing, and like you said, traditional marketing, which you don't really do, and that creates this false sense of it being popular. People will come and ask about it, like protein water is a good one. I'll throw this at you. May not agree. You don't have to agree with all of my perspectives either, or you might agree. But it comes back every 5 years or so, right? It sort of does this cycle where it disappears because there's really no reuptake on the purchase, and then it resurfaces again as like protein water is this new thing, and some people go the collagen route to try to make it sort of fit what a protein water product, I guess experientially should feel like. Some do the proper isolate route, and you get that foamy, it doesn't really translate into a fruit juicy type consistency. It gets quite thick and foamy, and just like they might buy it once, they won't buy it again. And sometimes they blend the two together, and eventually just drops off and disappears again. Comes back in 5 years, because I think the people coming up with the concepts aren't as connected to whether the demand's really there or not. And I see that from time to time. So it's super smart that you're now at this level with the ingredient level, taking all those things into account and making sure that you build that demand. That's so important. That's another thing I think some brands overlook, is before you can really penetrate, say, retail or something like that, you sort of have to have people asking for your brand in some way, shape, or form, And unless that retail's got a gap in their range and you just happen to be nailing it, that's cool too, But you really want to build that groundswell around it. And whether that's using ingredients that have already had some of that built in, you're helping with that, right? So if they use your ingredients as that added layer of awareness or demand sprinkled in, whether that's them doing their own marketing or just taking their time building the brand and getting that word of mouth, whatever it is, you've got to sort of put that in before you just plonk something out there, even if it's the greatest thing on earth. And I can think of a few brands doing that. Right, they're using some incredible ingredients. It's like stacked, but they haven't really told the story, right? Like they sort of haven't explained, like, why would you want this super stacked product, and why is it worth this much? Why did I create this brand? So you've got to do that. And the fact that NNB is doing that at the ingredient level is just so helpful to brands that are looking to work with you. I think it's huge, and it deserves sort of being called out on this little pod we're doing here, because it's very innovative. How did you figure that out, or was that just something you been wanting to do for a while, or how did you come to that place?
It was, I've been in this for 17 years now, and I've been on the brand side for 15 years. So it's essentially, I started out in product formulations actually before I got into brand management. So it's essentially 15 years of me being approached by raw material vendors who just weren't getting it.
Yeah.
That's how I sort of came to this place, right?
Yeah.
15 years of being taken to dinners, of being approached at shows, of buy my ingredient and just not getting it. And then coming across the ones that do get it. And you don't even always have to build the story entirely from the ground up. No. Oftentimes there's a demand or a need in the marketplace that you're filling, and it makes the story that much easier to tell. So for example, with NNB, we have the unique opportunity where we can create ingredients. I mean, people are excited about the ingredients that we're launching. We've got like 20 ingredients in the hopper and weight, right? But we're prioritizing based on what the current trends are, based on where the market's headed, based on what people are asking for. And so we could spend, $5 million creating the problem and then saying that we have the answer, or you could spend a tenth of that to just simply fill an existing need in terms of the story that you're telling. And so that's how we go about it.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing a lot of brands and ingredient manufacturers and even retailers get wrong. It's like, I think about some of my friends in the industry, some of the brilliant minds, some people and often we're in this mindset of we need to invent something that's never existed before, right? And that's cool. You can do that. You can do that, but you would maybe want to do that once you've built the base of your pyramid for a while, and then you put that little bit on top. But why wouldn't you solve the problem of being the most trusted? Like if you're a trusted voice, this can just be one example. If you're already a trusted voice, why not bring out a commodity that you can just make sure that people are getting a quality one of, whether that's creatine like you guys are doing recently. So purist creatine, creatine's a commodity and it's huge. But how many good quality creatines are on the market right now? There was only Creapure for years and years. It was just Creapure. I think Allmax did one other thing. They might have just trademarked, regular high, fine mesh size creatine or something like that after they dropped doing Creapure. But I saw nothing. Then finally we got Purist Creatine, which is your one, right? I think there's iCreatine's another, competing one out there, and Creapure is still around. But if someone just comes along and maybe makes like a better Tongat Ali, because everyone's buying Tongat Ali. You've only got LJ100. That's a standardized form. No one really asks for that. Trusted voices in the industry could just be like, here's a damn good Indonesian sort. Whatever the thing is, I've tried 10. This was the best one I could find. So I think sometimes people overlook those easy wins where you could just fill a demand that's already huge and just make sure they're getting a damn good one that they can trust, because there's just look at iHerb, look, at Amazon. How many of those are really low quality crap? Yeah, probably a fair few, and people would just love access to a good quality one, but they don't know where to start. So they click on the cheapest or whatever. So that's often overlooked as well. So it's smart that you guys think about that too, like just having a better quality tyrosine. I would use your tyrosine any day. I took it. You sent me some samples. It's like, this is like the best tyrosine I've ever had. So problem solved for me later when I'm developing the product and I need tyrosine. It's just like, well, I may as well get the best one I've ever had as opposed to some new thing that never existed before that boosts dopamine. So I love that you guys are doing that. Tell me a bit about, you work with some pretty big names. So like Shawn Wells is a pretty prominent figure in the industry. How does he work with you and NNB, and like kind of what's his role? Is he more of a consultant or is he an ingredient developer, or how does that fit into the picture?
Well, he's all of the above. But what I would say before I touch on Shawn Wells, one thing that I will touch on the previous comment you made about just doing another ingredient better. Another strategy that people need to consider is the hero ingredient strategy. So you mentioned previously about, we can do this just because it's never been done before. That's still okay. But if you compartmentalize it, do the thing that no one has ever done before, knowing that it's going to cost you a lot of money to do, knowing that it's not going to sell a whole lot. But that's where you're going to do your PR on. That's what you're going to do advertising on. That's what you're going to do podcasts on. You're going to say, look at this shiny new toy I made. This represents the technology my company has had. But then you've got 5 other commodity ingredients. So you start the conversation with this, but then you actually sell these. But this is the conversation starter, and you're selling everything less. So like right now, our conversation starter is dileucine. You know, an amino acid peptide that surpasses any other amino acid that we've had before, more anabolic, but because of its cost and because of the difficulty to flavor, it doesn't sell. It's not going to sell as much as pure creatine, right? But it starts the conversation because it represents the technology that we have. So that's another strategy that brands need to consider if they want to make a shiny new toy, knowing that it won't sell a lot. Smart. But jumping to your question about Shawn though. So Shawn is, I would say, the inventor of new ingredients, and it's very hard in this industry to pin down somebody that you can just call an inventor of ingredients, because a lot of ingredients come about, not all, but most, typically like group of individuals or a scientist working within a university who then has his idea patented with business partners who then has the ingredient resold through a distributor. So even if it's one scientist coming up with something, you're still collaborating or working with other people. And I'm not saying that Shawn doesn't, but what I am saying is that in the case of Shawn, you have one person that ends up being a collaborator with many ingredients, right? And so many first to market ingredients, more importantly. And in addition to that, he is also a formulator of a lot of different products. So what I would call him, and what's interesting is he created a title for himself, world's greatest formulator. But then because of the amount of patents that he's a part of, because of the amount of supplements that he's formulated, easily you hear a world's greatest formulator and everybody wants to call BS, right? Like, how could you just say that? But then nobody has the resume, so nobody can quite challenge it. So he can go around saying it, but nobody has done over 1,000 supplements for major brands. Nobody has been a part of 40 patents for brand new ingredients first to market. So even though subconsciously you want to say BS, you can't find anybody with that resume for inventing new ingredients and then for formulating that amount of products. So Shawn's role within the company as a chief science officer is this. You have other manufacturers in China and India who make ingredients like we do, right? We're not unique in that regard.
True.
The difference is typically there's not a whole lot of English going on. There's a broker that works with the manufacturer. And then that storyline I gave you of the scientist or the university or the group of people who make an ingredient, they get business partners, they patent it. Then they go to a distributor. The distributor does human clinical research, toxicology, safety work on the ingredient. And then the people that came up with the ingredient don't get their money back until the manufacturer recoups all that. The distributor recoups all that research money, but then they're responsible for distributing the ingredient. But then the distributor will go to China and India to have the ingredient synthesized. Well, that's like typically how most of the industry works. And so immediately what you see in that network is there's no creativity coming from the manufacturer.
No.
Where Shawn comes in is he's bridging the gap. Kai Lin, who's the CEO or the president, I should say, of NNB, to bridge the gap, instead of just making the ingredient and waiting for somebody to come up with something and then waiting for a distributor to contact them to synthesize the ingredient, gives Shawn a piece of the company, and immediately Shawn's ideas can come to life in NNB's lab and manufacturing facility. There's no middleman. There's no distributor in between. It's straight from Shawn's mind to the lab, which could be a couple of years in production, but still the process is, it's much simpler from idea straight to a manufacturing facility. There's nobody else in the industry that's doing that. We have a manufacturer of the highest quality, but then in addition to that, we have a formulator, probably the best formulator for new ingredients in the industry, attaching themselves directly to this manufacturer. It's a unique combination that led me to move from the brand side to the B2B side, because this is just a combination, this level of creativity, this level of speed to market to new ingredients. I've never seen it before. And honestly, even though I was a brand person in terms of like consumers, going from B to C, I didn't think I would see this level of creativity and speed to market again. And so I decided to join NNB as a result.
Well, and the beauty of that too is the story doesn't get lost, right? Which is kind of what you're explaining there. To anyone listening, think about that. The people that invented it, they had the reason for it, they had the problem to solve, are slowly not really associated with what happens to the ingredient after that. It's in the manufacturer's hands. They're only going to get their funds back once all their expenses are paid. The manufacturer isn't usually a marketer of any sort of significance, except for, like you said, a few pamphlets at some trade shows, right? And the demand doesn't come from trade shows. Like, consumers aren't at trade shows. So no one knows about it till someone picks it up and runs with it with a brand. But then the whole story is lost. Whereas Shawn can be inventing things that solve a problem that you guys already have, and therefore connect the whole reason why it was made, the reason why it's better, or why it's something that maybe hasn't been seen before, like with DL185, and that all feeds in intact. So it's absolutely brilliant, and it just makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's similar to how I think sometimes. Ultimately, with some brands I want to come up with and whatnot, how slow it can be to get these things done. It's and MOQs and all those things. What would be a great solution would just be being able to manufacture your own brands as a brand owner. It's similar to that concept. It's taking it way further.
Vertically integrated would be the term.
Yeah, vertically integrated, and that's not easy, because it can cost you probably up to $1 million to set up a proper facility. Maybe you could do a stripped back one for manufacturing.
Being in the manufacturing business, the amount of money lost, the amount of complications, the amount of regulations, it is not for the faint of heart.
It's tough. It's really tough, isn't it? And that's another good thing for people to know. If you're waiting on your manufacturer to do things, there's kind of reasons behind that. And the simpler you can keep a project for them, the better. You really want to have it quite straight in your head before you start going to them with it. So all of this stuff, it's not easy to bring really cool products to the market. It's a lot harder than people think, let alone bring great ingredients. So I think it's incredible what you guys are doing, and the way you're sharing it, Dustin, it's so cool. I mean, the fact that you reached out to me, I was for me, that's like Christmas, getting a package of ingredients to sample, and no other ingredient manufacturers doing that. I've even reached out to the odd few, just thinking, look, it'd be good to build that relationship. I might need these guys later. And it's like they've just never heard of the concept of maybe sending out some samples for someone to review. They're just so far out of their scope of what they thought of. Whoever's running their Insta or whatever. Of course, you can buy samples. I'm not saying you couldn't, as obviously a brand developer or whatever, you purchase a few, and that's what you generally will do. And you might then get them tested and whatnot, and start developing your product from there. And sometimes you can order for the manufacturer that you're using. They just do more of the pack down side. There's a lot of ways you can go. Okay, cool. And then maybe tell me a bit about there's a few things that I've picked up on podcasts that you've been on and things that you've said along the way. Tell me about the idea behind Ingredient City. I think that's a really cool concept.
Yeah. So Ingredient City, this is something Kylan and Shawn, mostly Kylan, sort of put together. And it's, when you go to Nanjing, the headquarters, we have, like our main office building, the way most offices run, right? You have a building, different floors for different companies. So I go in there, NNB is 2 floors of like our office staff in there, which is cool. And then we have a nearby building where we have like a lab that's like a few floors of the building, right? So a few floors of labs that we have in a building, which is huge, which is also pretty cool. But then outside of Nanjing, so that's already a couple of floors in one main office building, 3 floors of lab space and another manufacturing building. But then outside of that, there's like an hour-and-a-half drive outside of Nanjing where we have the factory workers, where we have hundreds of thousands of square feet of manufacturing, where the materials are actually made and put together, everything from the liquids to the powders, everything. And it's called Ingredient City because it's basically hundreds of thousands of feet of just straight manufacturing, right?
Wow.
And this is what I'm talking about when I say, when it comes to China and India, there are like some big time manufacturers out there with just like thousands and thousands of square feet of just manufacturing, making raw materials. That's what we have. But the thing is that we have that in addition to sales team, American, leadership team, scientists. So it's that plus more. That's what Ingredient City is that it's hundreds of thousands of square feet of manufacturing, of machines that we're able to maneuver in and out so that we always have speed to market. It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, okay, and the significance of that is so impactful. I think not a lot of people would fully grasp it that haven't peeked behind that supplement curtain before, And this industry is set to expand exponentially in the next 5 to 7 years in just about every market, certainly including Australia, which has its own challenges with compliance. And every country has its own thing where you need to navigate. And certainly, I'm quite across that over the years, and from some tough experiences as well. And so, but it can be done, and I think it's important for these different nations to innovate or be at least part of that innovation going forward.
Yeah,
that's why I think it's great that NNB hasn't neglected Australia as a place that you support. A lot of places do neglect the Oz market because it's a little bit tough,
so difficult.
a little bit more paperwork and whatnot. And just you have to be a little bit more clear to figure out what classification you fit into. You want to stay obviously a food grade supplement in most cases, which you can with sports supplements to a large degree before you start. And you obviously have to adjust your marketing a little bit as well for the Australian market. But so it's great that you guys don't do that, and it's really good to see places like Switch Nutrition's a good brand that's definitely picked up some of your ingredients. They've just done Purist creatine as well. We just got some delivered to the store. Can't wait to have some. I love good quality creatine. And look, we may as well talk about that briefly for a second just to help people understand, because this is something I wanted to touch on. I just want to talk a bit about how not all ingredients are created equal. For the end consumers listening, obviously you'll hear this phrase in my store sometimes, and that's just creatine's creatine. That's just one example, for example. Creatine mono is creatine mono. And it's kind of like, well, it is, it is the ingredient that's being used, but the quality, the particle size, the solubility, and the purity can all vary a lot. And that what that means is it's not so much for the gains. Like, sure, you get more gains from a more pure creatine, probably, right? Almost certainly, brand for brand. But what you'll find is it's the user experience that matters, and a lot of users are neglecting their own experience sometimes. It's like if you buy that creatine, take it home, take a scoop and feel really sore in the stomach, for about 30 minutes, you might park it and never use it again. And as much as it might have been $40 for a half kilo, or, a great price from one of these bulk retailers online.
If the adherence goes down because the experience is bad, then...
Right. You wasted that money as opposed to saving it. So you may as well spend the, $60 or whatever, 69 for a half kilo of proper, pure creatine. That's the going rate in Australia. Obviously, it's different in the US dollar. And then you have a great experience. You can use it regularly. You don't have to worry about it, stomach upset. So, and that's a great problem that you're solving with that. I'm so glad that we've got some in, and, Switch has picked that up. So shout out to them, Greg over there. Nice. And also, Genius Pure. It's one of the few places where you can get it. You can get it in a single, ingredient product, stack it with whatever you want, and experience some of the best. Genius Pure really rocked me. It's not the same as other Alpha-GPC, man. Like, what's the secret sauce to that one? You probably can't go into too much detail, but it's a little bit different. It's not as hygroscopic. Its purity's high, but I've had high purity Alpha-GPC before. This hits different. Anything you can share about how you got it to be so good?
Yeah, so the secret is not as dramatic as you might think it is.
Right.
It's largely has more to do with the poor quality of Alpha-GPC that's out there, and less to do with anything amazing that we did. You have third-party trademarked and patented Alpha-GPC, where they have to do it at a 50% concentration because of how hygroscopic it is, which is fine, but that impacts the purity. But then also they're using, soy as part of what they're using to essentially reduce the hygroscopic nature of the Alpha-GPC. I won't get into if the soy has positive or negative effects because we don't know. The big issue is that when buying generic 50% Alpha-GPC, we find that it's not the same content as, like the Alpha size or like the patented trademark Alpha-GPCs. They're using, depending on which vendor is manufacturing the generic, there could be different kinds of filler. You know, I've had issues in the past in my early days of formulating. I did a pre-workout using alpha size was sort of breaking the bank in terms of like my cost per serving. I went generic and I was selling headache in a bottle, you know, in terms of like the user feedback. Yeah. And so that can be tricky when you're dealing with concentrations as low as 50%. And then on top of that, you go generic. Well, you don't exactly know what the 50% is going to be unless you're using a high quality ingredient like alpha size. And so that's what gets tricky. And then if you do use an ingredient that seems to work well, what's the consistency from lot to lot? Is the 50% that you filler that you're using today going to be the same, you know, 2-3 lots from now? So that's one issue. And so when I say that our secret sauce is more in the lack of quality of our competitors, what we did is that we went without soy. And the reason we were able to do that, and the reason why we were able to bump the concentration up to 90%, is because we're using a polymer technology on the material itself that reduces the hygroscopic nature of it. We use this same polymer technology in other ingredients as well. So we do an ingredient called hydroprime, for example. And you know, glycerol for the longest time has been known to clump. 65% glycerol helped to reduce the clumping, but it was still a problem. We're doing 65% glycerol, but we've applied the same polymer technology that reduces the clumping and makes the powder even finer than competitive 65%. So that's what we're doing for the alpha size. And so as a result of being able to do that, the amount of filler extra ingredients, you know, outside of just using our polymer technology is, you know, nearly non-existent. And so we are not necessarily doing something different with Alpha-GPC. We're delivering more Alpha-GPC to the body without filler at higher quality, and that's the difference that you're feeling. And it's the issue is the experience of low quality Alpha-GPC that makes ours feel so amazing and out of this world, not that we've done something so amazing with the Alpha-GPC. And to take it even further, what's amazing about simply just making high purity, high quality Alpha-GPC, we did an acute study, 1 dose. So most of the choline ingredients on the market today, 4 to 6 weeks, Alzheimer's patients, people suffering with cognitive decline, that's the research pool. But then they turn around and use it in energy drinks for 20-something-year-olds, right? So what we did is we used the target 20-something-year-old audience, and we used the same scenario that you would do for an energy drink or pre-workout, just 1 dose, how powerful it is with 1 hit. And we had a 108% increase in Stroop test scores. Stroop test is a cognitive function test that the parameters of which you can equate to focus. So we're delivering to brands the claim, double your focus, 108% increase in focus. That's how powerful it is with 1 dose.
Yeah, and you know, you can feel that. Like, honestly, I took, you know, I can put it in my coffee. I mean, I've got it in, you know, just a powder form. So I can sprinkle it into just about anything, you know, pre-workout or coffee. There's a brightening up that I've felt before, maybe back in the early days of trying, you know, Alpha-GPC for the first time, and the brain hasn't had it before and you're a little more sensitive. But it's just fantastic. And I think that's just a great example of, you know, you can read an ingredient panel. You know, I say this sometimes to people, and it's sort of, you know, because people go through probably about 3 stages as a consumer, right? They go from the first stage where they don't really know what an ingredient panel means. Then they get to the next stage where they sort of think they know more than everyone. I was one of them too, and I can read an ingredient panel now. So I can just compare 2 and go, this one's better. And then you finally hit that 3rd stage. I've got a fistful of customers that are sort of in my inner circle like this, and they're the same, where you can go, yep, but this brand's one hits completely different to this brand's one with a very similar panel. And often when you trace it back, you can either trace it back to great ingredients like the ones NNB does, or great manufacturing. And one manufacturer I've identified, you know, I've traced back the brands that come from this manufacturer. This is more, you know, where they blend the products together, you know, that sort of, and anything they seem to do that I get from the US, it hits harder with just the same ingredients that you've seen elsewhere. And I bet you can guess which place I'm talking about.
We have a few good manufacturers in the U.S., so I don't know if I could guess.
I'll say it then. Yeah, because to be fair, that might be politically incorrect for you, right? You have these great relationships, and you just call out one. But Simpson Labs, man, They make like a few brands that I'm pretty sure they make them anyway. It's fairly evident. Obviously, that's private information, but I can kind of tell who's working with them from the content and whatnot. They've started to do a really cool podcast as well. And anything that comes out of that facility, it's a different level, scoop for scoop to something else that might have similar ingredients to it. And I think it comes down to the same thing you're talking about with something as simple as Alpha-GPC done correctly. I think it's just that the ingredients are put in at the correct dosages and the quality of the sourcing's there and it's blended correctly. And that's what can be hard in the industry sometimes because you're giving the manufacturer a lot of power. And as long as they put, maybe sometimes you're ordering in your own raw materials and maybe sometimes you're not allowed to depending on the scenario. But you're really relying on them to pour every bit of those powders in to those mixes and make sure that you're actually getting that absolute true to label product. And that can vary, just like any chemistry can vary. Like everything's an art form, right? And it's, like you said, it's a tough industry, but it's also the quality of the machinery, the how much passion and how strict they are with making sure their procedures are bang on. And when you get that blended powder, coming out, just how true to label that actually ends up being with quality ingredients can make a massive difference. So it's a testament to sometimes you've got to try the experience, and also it helps when you've got brands like NNB where you can actually look not just for the ingredients but also the ingredient qualities, so they're going to be punctuated by the fact that it's Genius Pure or it's Purest Creatine. Like it's that you're actually getting quality ingredients in there, and it'd be very hard for them to not have put that in there because to do so comes with a lot of legal ramifications. So it just helps consumers know they're getting a quality product before they have to try it, because you've got to spend your money first. I mean, obviously, in our store we open a lot of products and allow people to buy them by the scoop, or we'll give them a try. But cool. A lot of consumers don't have that luxury, right? They're going to buy it off the internet, and so I guess that's another thing that I want listeners to pick up on here, is that if you do see these ingredients from NNB in your product, it certainly helps that you're getting a quality product, because you're not always going to have that industry insight into what manufacturing facility it came from, what they ordered from China, and you don't get that. And that's where some products they get sort of notoriety for being great, but those same ingredients might have been used before. It's just that this particular people are like, yeah, that one, and that helps with the repurchase and obviously the word of mouth on the product too. So okay, that's incredible, man. I really appreciate you giving me some of those insights. There's also another thing that seems to be I guess a mission statement for you guys, which is pure, potent, and precise. Is that kind of like a guiding ethos that you guys came up with? The CEO, maybe, tell me just a little bit about that.
Yeah, it was actually sort of prompted. We were thinking on our side that we needed a new slogan that sort of encapsulated what we did. The previous slogan, we create ingredients, it's what we did, but then it was sort of like, in what way can we convey that we're creating ingredients? Because it's cool that we create ingredients, but like I said, there are other manufacturers that do. They're just not customer facing. They're not even distributors. So that's the reason why we were unique in this space. But then the phrase "we created ingredients" didn't encapsulate the direction that we were going in with our ingredients. Like, what kind of ingredients? Why should people care about the fact that we can create our own ingredients? And so Price Plow sort of brought this up as well, helping us to trigger the change. We were already thinking it. Price Plow brought it up, and we were like, okay, we need something that better encapsulates what we do. So the idea behind Pure, Potent, Precise is essentially this. Pure meaning, we were just talking about Alpha-GPC, but it crosses over into all of our ingredients. We're going for highest purity possible. For our commodity items, that means, like greater mixability, less impurities, higher quality manufacturing, lower levels of toxicity or, heavy metals, everything across the board. But for innovative items, that means, like, for example, berberine has to convert first to dihydroberberine to be absorbed. Well, we're just going to make straight dihydroberberine. Okay, so rhodiola rosea, it's the salidroside that's responsible for a lot of the adaptogenic effects. We're just going to make salidroside. The antioxidant power of mushrooms is coming from L-ergothionine. And populations that consume more mushrooms, especially populations like the Mediterranean diet that consume more mushrooms, their life expectancy is longer. Okay, we're just going to make straight L-ergothioneine. So pure means, sort of going this drug route of just fermenting or synthesizing the active without extracting it from its starting material. And so we're talking about tiny, tiny dosages now.
Yeah.
And so that goes into the potent part of our phrase. So when we're creating these ingredients pure at tiny, tiny dosages, what immediately happens is that you can use multiple times the efficacy of a standard herb, of a standard mushroom within a tiny dose. So the Solidro Pure, or the Solidroside example that I gave you, we're calling it Solidro Pure as its trademark name. Rhodiola rosea, 2,000 milligrams, right? 2 grams of rhodiola. Standard dose is like 500 milligrams, right? 2,000 milligrams, that's, at least, 2 or 3 00 capsules right there, usually about 3. We're talking about the equivalency in terms of Solidroside content we can get in 20 milligrams. 20 milligrams being the equivalent to 2,000 milligrams of rhodiola rosea. So that's where the potency comes in, and this question has come up, and this question always comes up, especially when we're doing toxicology work and generally recognized as safe status. We are having potencies of the core constituents of ingredients at levels the industry hasn't seen. Now you can take supplements with potency levels the industry hasn't seen before, and we're blurring the lines with drugs at this point. And so that's where the potency comes in. And then precise, I spoke to you earlier about how with Alpha-GPC, if you go generic from one lot to the next, what's that 50% filler? Well, that's a quality issue with the manufacturer. Even if you do have a quality manufacturer, right? You have the #1 vendor of herbs in the world. Well, based on the fertilization, based on the growing season, based on the region or country it came from, the constituents in the herbs can vary. And so you have different people reacting to herbs differently. You have herbs having different reactions to medications. You have herbs having different reactions to people's genetics. You have somebody using an herb and the first 2 bottles were okay, but the 3rd bottle made them feel weird. Like, it can be all over the place. The precision that we're able to provide, we are making the same material at purity levels of over 90%, and it's going to act the same way every time because the consistency in the DNA of the material is going to be the same every single time, and it'll hit the same every single time. And so that's the direction we're going in with our new ingredient creation. And so that's why we switched to pure, potent, precise, because it helps to encompass that.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I mean, it gives, getting capsule space back is huge, and even consumers will be able to pick that. I mean, often when I'm sort of, particularly with really stacked test boosters or nootropics, which, they can blow out to 6 capsules sometimes, and that can be a bottleneck for people. They kind of don't want to have that. They have an official already multivitamin, maybe some NMN, and it just sort of gets to this point where they want to have 10, 20 capsules every morning. So that's huge, and it gives you a bit more wiggle room to be creative with your product. I'm a big fan of stripped back products, don't get me wrong. I love it when you can sort of get the minimum amount of ingredients to get the sort of most effective product for the given use case. I'm a big fan of that, as opposed to, there's nothing wrong with kitchen sink formulas, they're fun, but often they can start to overlap and get in the way of each other a little bit when you put all those ingredients together. And you sort of take away a bit of consumer choice around how much they want in their stack sometimes. So well, that's incredible, man. I think the last question I'll ask you, and then we can kind of wrap it up, but we definitely have to do this again because this is awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
With the unique insight you've got and all the experience you've had, where do you see the industry heading? And what do you think brands should be thinking about right now? What's on your mind at the moment?
I have a lot on my mind at the moment. I'm always thinking about the next 5 years. So on a couple of fronts, there's on the one side, there's the GLP-1 craze going on, where I think most brands are thinking about it wrong. I'd say 90% of brands are thinking about it wrong. Agreed. And they're going to land in hot water with their local regulatory authorities because they say, okay, GLP-1's popular. Let me try to stick a GLP-1 claim on my product. Wrong. The efficacy isn't there. You're not elevating GLP-1 at super efficacious levels 100% of the time, 24/7. The consumers are going to hate the product because it's not going to get them to where they want.
And
you're essentially lying on the label. Yeah, you'll get sued at some point. And so I would say the positive turn that the industry has made on the positive side of it is providing supplemental, assistance for GLP-1 use, like for the gut biome, protein, things like that. Yeah. But for the people that think that the weight management category is on a downturn because of GLP-1 drugs, let's put GLP-1 claims on our products. No. The future is this. And this is based on US American numbers, so this isn't for every country. But 12% of the population has tried it. 6 to 8% of the population, that number fluctuates because it's rising, is on it. But the key thing is they're on it for less than a year. So here's the trick that people need to attach themselves to. And this is where we're going with dihydroberberine. If you walk into a room with 10 people, one of them has tried GLP-1 at some point. Yeah. Crazy number to think about, but that's kind of where we're headed right now.
Wow, yeah.
And if you walk into a room with 20 people, one person is on GLP-1. So that's crazy.
Yeah.
But if you think about it that way, 78% of GLP-1 users use it for less than a year because the weight loss is rapid, and you either have to stop because you hit your goal, you have to stop because of the side effects, or you have to stop because of the amount of muscle and bone loss your doctor tells you to stop, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
big time. Yeah.
1 in 20 people that are in a room are using GLP-1, but will stop soon. That's the key that nobody's thinking about. So what does that mean? The post GLP-1 window. What will these people do and take to keep that weight off? You can avoid FTC violations by saying post GLP-1 window or GLP-1 recovery or any term that relates to a time period after GLP-1 use. And then you target your products to that, controlling the blood sugar, controlling the appetite. You don't have to, and here's the great thing, you don't have to promise crazy weight loss. Weight loss supplements that weren't amphetamine related, they've sucked in the past. Absolutely terrible. Best things for weight loss that have been out there are either amphetamine related and were taken off the market, or they're peptides, right?
Yeah.
And everything else that's promising this 1-2% weight loss or slight boost in your metabolism doesn't work for most people because they can't get portion control and energy expenditure down, correctly. And caloric deficit, they can't fix all those things. Yeah. So if most people can't do caloric deficit, they can't increase their energy expenditure, if they can't eat right, your 200 calories burned a day from your herbal fat burner isn't going to do anything. Yeah. But if they've lost the weight from GLP-1, all you got to do is help them keep it off. Yes. So it's a better return on investment for you because it's easier to accomplish. And there are actually supplements and ingredients out there that can get you to that point.
Yeah.
We did a mitoburn calorie burn study that showed caloric that showed caloric intake control. We have dihydroberberine that helps to control blood sugar. And so that's an easier route to go. And you have a massive audience for that. That's 1 in 20 people that could be using your post GLP-1 supplement, and you're not violating anything. So that's one trend that I see coming. Hopefully people are smart enough to attach themselves to it.
Yep.
The other thing that I see coming is peptides are growing, but it depends on the country because they're still research chemicals. And when I say that they're growing, access is still very limited because they're technically not legal for the most part.
Yeah, legal access is limited. That's right. And there's a real black market explosion, and you just know it's going to bring that negative attention soon. It's going to get whacked, and they're going to have that sort of huge disillusion of all these people that can't get these peptides. Not a lot of them are prescription anyway, and they're going to be looking for other solutions potentially. But over to you, because I think you're about to give some more insight into that.
Yeah, and then you have the ones that become like legal that are prescribed or that are used. You've got like the Tesamorelins of the world, but they'll cost people a couple grand to do a cycle, right?
It's so expensive.
And even the ones that work in becoming legalized, it's the side effects and the overuse and the improper use, right?
Yep.
So here's the other big thing that it's not a thing, but I think it could be, at least as far as what NNB is doing. It's something that I brought up because, we're making drug-like ingredients, but then it's like, how are peptides going to affect us? And you also have, and people aren't paying attention to it, these, I would say people going to practitioners now. You have the biohacking space expanding, people getting IVs and medications and TRT, and that comes out of their wallet that they would use to buy supplements. So the key is supplements that assist these things. So we have Mitoburn L-Beta that mimics the effects of exercise. You could use far less, SLUPP, for example, that's like, causing people to sweat at their desk like crazy. You can use less of that if you're using molecules to assist that have almost no side effects to reduce the dosage of the things that have side effects. You have GLP-1s and now you have the GLP-3s. Well, what if you could use less of those because you're combining it with the hydroberberine? The hydroberberine is cheap. There's almost no side effects. You're using these peptides that do cause side effects. What if you half your dose, combine it with a supplement? Now you have a side effect free, efficacious ride that you're going on to meet your end goal. So supplements that can assist peptides so you can save your wallet and save yourself from side effects. Like, I am not as well versed in the peptide space because I stay grounded in the supplement space. But when I do, because I have worked for a bodybuilding brand and, I have friends who are bodybuilders, and when they're talking about their stacks and things they go through, it's like, okay, even if you're not a bodybuilder, right? Just say you're going to use a stack and you're going to get in shape for like the beach or you're getting in shape for summertime. You have to hide from the world because you're sweating bullets at your desk. You're going through side effects. You're going through all this stuff over the course of 8 to 12 weeks to be ready for the beach. Well, what if you could not hide from the world when you're doing, like your crazy stack, because you're doing a lower dosage and you're combining it with, high potency molecules and legal supplements. So that's something else that I see is the future where people are like, oh, are peptides going to overtake supplements and will they ever become legal? How about, neither goes away? How about you assist the peptides so that you can lower the dosages and that you have them work, in conjunction? That's something else that I see a potential future for going that way.
That's almost the definition of a supplement, right? It supplements things. And I think to your point around AI, there's a huge emerging space there where people are using AI to ask what would be good to take with my MOTS-C, or what would be good to take with my retatrutide, or whatever it is, my GLP-1, and what can help support this. And those ingredients are going to start coming up. And a smart consumer would do that because it's like you said, you can reduce the dose. You can also support it being more efficacious, but you can also maybe not need it at all or have breaks from it if you didn't like the side effects, but continue to use the supporting supplements, mimicking at least a good 20% of what it was doing, but it's manageable on a regular basis. And that's what I love about supplements. I can use them consistently and I'm not reducing my lifespan, getting into gray territory where we don't know if it causes cancer down the track, or whoops, turns out it does. These things have been around a lot longer. They're a little bit less extreme, but they supplement the body and they tune it up that little bit so you can get more out of it in a long-term sense, as opposed to really putting the foot to the floor, accelerator pedal with things like injecting peptides and whatnot that, like you said, aren't sustainable long-term. 1 in 20 people in that room, the other ones, and they're about to stop at some point. So, and I totally agree. A lot of these things come with those sort of side effects that aren't talked about enough. It's very influencer driven too, right? You know how these things work in the background better than anyone. China reaches out and here's some free peptides. Talk about it, get your friends on it, give you a little kickback. And a lot of people don't realize that. They're being sold to. Like, these guys aren't just talking about them like they're God's greatest gift to, the space. For just the fun of it, they're incentivized too, and sometimes that's a little bit of a hidden motivation that people don't realize. So I think it's good to put that out there so they're just consumer aware, and I definitely think you've got a really good point there around that being a space that's going to expand on supplements to support those types of really extreme compounds. I think that's brilliant. Any last thoughts before we wrap? They're two big giveaways there. Like, anyone listening, that's some huge game, free game. Any other sort of corner or space that's got you interested right now that you want to mention, or do you want to keep a few things close to your chest, Dustin?
No, I think because we had mentioned it before this podcast started, but I want to keep it close to the chest because it's a brand new venture for us that we haven't completely dove into yet. So I'll just sort of leave it at that for now. I think the last thing that I'll say that we've already, been public facing with is our dive into the beverage space. So I've been talking about, smaller dosage, high potency. So the beverage space, what's happening is you have a strong demand for differentiation, but when people reach mass market, you don't really have the appetite, for the tighter margins that come with differentiation. People complain that the biggest energy drinks are just caffeine and taurine, and it's like a 5-cent cost. But then it's like when you look at the margins of mass distribution, the energy drink game is absolutely brutal. You're going for pennies for every energy drink that you sell. On top of that, it's brutal from an organoleptic standpoint, because despite all the cool things you could do, at the end of the day, every research survey on energy drinks is, I recognize the brand, it tastes really good, and it woke me up. None of the differentiation and the really detailed focus and well-being and longevity, all this stuff that brands want their drinks to be. What people are choosing drinks based on is, I recognize that brand, this tastes good, and I'm awake now. That's how most energy drinks are sold. And so how can you differentiate in the space? Well, these tiny molecules that are going to add these feelings, but you're still able to maintain the taste, you're still able to maintain the penny profit, and then it's up to you, obviously, to make the brand recognizable. But I think what we're doing with these smaller molecules is going to have a huge impact on the energy drink space.
And really get some cans to stand out above the rest, because right now it doesn't happen all too often for the reasons that you already mentioned. Well, that's huge, man. Look, I really hope we can do this again. There's just so much to cover and so much in your brain. I mean, I've seen you on podcasts and seen a few things that you've said, and I'm just like, this guy really knows his stuff, and you're a huge resource to the whole industry, in my opinion. And I really love how you support even smaller brands that work with NNB up to really big brands. You don't, you don't differentiate. You support anyone that you can, and it's really good organic support that you just put out there. I think it's huge. And I think you're doing great things over there with Shawn. And I think NNB is just set to be one of the most trusted ingredient brands going forward. I mean, it's and I think they deserve that sort of title as things evolve. So thanks again, man, and really hope to see you on here again sometime in the future. And keep us posted on anything new that's going down over at NNB. Before we go, though, just tell people where they can reach out and get in touch with you if they're a brand looking to use your ingredients or wanting to work with NNB.
Yeah, I think the best way to reach us is if you actually go to the contact page on our website, you have the ability to sign up for our newsletter and reach out to us. And so that's a good combination, because our newsletter is going to keep you up to date with the latest grade of what's going on in the industry, how NNB's ingredients or how our science sort of fits like the industry needs and demand. So it's a two-pronged approach. You'll not only learn the latest and greatest coming from NNB, but you'll also have insights into the industry. You'll have insights into industry trends. And so joining that newsletter is going to be the best way to stay connected with us and to stay connected with what we're doing. And you can do that by checking out the sign up on the contact page on www.nnbnutrition.com.
Awesome. All right. Well, there you have it, folks. Head over there if you want to speak to NNB and stay in touch with them. Big thanks to Dustin, and man, hope to speak again soon. Have a great rest of your day, man.
Yeah, for sure. This is great. Talk to you soon.
Speak to you soon.